Joe Biden heads to college campus to try to convince young people to vote for him and throws Israel under the bus. Plus, major legislation to protect IVF and an update on the Trump trial. Its verdict with Senator Ted Cruz, and it starts right now. Senator, let's really get into this week. I think it's fair to say that Joe Biden proved to the American people there is nothing he's not willing to do to undermine Israel if it means getting the 30, 35 and under vote that is upset with him over standing with Israel early on to stick with him through Election Day. And it got a lot worse this week.
Well, that's right. The Democrats more and more are captive of the pro-Hamas wing of their Democrat Party. And pause for a second and reflect on how utterly insane it is that there is such a thing as a pro-Hamas wing of a major political party in America. But that's the simple reality. And young people in particular, look, this is the consequence of our universities being twisted and taken over by the radical left, taken over by the cultural Marxists who are poisoning our young people. It's what I wrote about in my latest book, Unwoke, How to Defeat Cultural Marxism in America. But these young people are being taught that Palestinians are victims and that Jews are oppressors and that the answer is violence and revolution against the so-called oppressors. And it's absolute vicious lies. But unfortunately, in the Democrat Party, it seems there are no adults. There is no one who will actually stand up and point out there's not a moral equivalency between Hamas terrorists murdering civilians and raping children and the IDF attacking and killing terrorists to protect civilians. Those are not the same. One is evil and one is good. There is no Democrat. Joe Biden's not capable of that clarity. And so instead, he went this past week to Morehouse College, and take a listen to what he had to say.
Innocent Palestinians caught in the middle of all of this. Men, women, and children killed or displaced in desperate need of water, food, and medicine. It's a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. That's why I've called for an immediate ceasefire. An immediate ceasefire to stop the fighting.
To be clear, he's saying, Israel, stop defending yourself. Stop killing the terrorists that came after you. You know where many of them are. You're continuing to try to find them and kill them because you understand that they're going to keep coming after you if you don't kill them. They've declared war on you. And he's saying, hey, ceasefire. And it's really a talk to Israel, not so much Hamas.
Well, it's actually a talk to American radicals. It's a talk to young people.
Great point.
And listen, Joe Biden, you listen to what he just said there. You know, if someone didn't know anything, they'd be like, gosh, why did Israel attack those poor, helpless people? Well, there was this thing called October 7th that somehow doesn't seem to be very relevant to Joe Biden or the Democrats' calculus, where Hamas terrorists deliberately carried out the greatest mass murder of Jews in a single day since the Holocaust. They deliberately targeted civilians. They targeted children. They mutilated corpses. It was horrific. Those Hamas terrorists are monsters, and Israel responded quite naturally, quite rightly, by saying it was going to utterly eradicate Hamas. Understand, Israel is not attacking civilians. Israel is attacking Hamas terrorists. Now, there are civilian casualties. Those civilian casualties happen because Hamas wants them to happen, because they use human shields. They use Palestinian civilians. They hide the terrorists. They put their headquarters in Gaza in the basement of a hospital to use Palestinian mothers and babies as human shields. They put missiles in the basements of elementary schools to use Palestinian children as human shields. And it is Hamas that wants Palestinian civilian casualties. Why? Because useful idiots like Joe Biden and the rest of the Democrat Party and the rest of the liars in the corporate media will then say what Joe Biden just said, which is Israel is the bad guy. And
Hamas lies a lot, and I think that's part of what people really need to understand. Hamas lied about the attack on the hospital, for example, early on, and they said that Israel bombed the hospital. We found out it was a rocket that Hamas shot. and a rocket that basically misfired, landed in the parking lot, blew up in that parking lot. Thank goodness it didn't actually hit the hospital itself.
Yeah, it was reported there were 500 casualties in the hospital. It turns out there were 0. I understand 0 and 500 are often confused. It was reported that Israel fired the rocket. That's kind of sort of right, except it was actually Palestinian Islamic Jihad.
Yeah.
And actually it was fired from inside Gaza. And understand, look, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, they don't have technology. So Israel uses smart bombs that are targeted so that when they're aiming at a terrorist, they hit the terrorist. Hamas does not. Hamas fires thousands and thousands of rockets that have no guidance.
Yeah,
they're
they just
basically
say,
a
that
tube.
way is Israel.
A tube with some propellant and some explosive and often shrapnel to kill civilians, and they'll fire it up in a general direction, but a substantial percentage of the rockets Hamas fires end up hitting Gaza because they don't know where it's going. They're just throwing them in the air. And by the way, they're also not aiming at military targets. It's not like they're aiming in Israel and saying, those are soldiers, let's shoot at them. They just fire them in the direction of Israel, and their view is, if I'm killing Jews...
It's good. It's a good rocket.
Hamas is happy if we are murdering Jews.
I want to tell you about our friends over at Blackout Coffee. If you're like me and you start your day early, I'm on the radio every day at 7 a.m. I have got to be awake. I've got to make sure that I'm studied up on the subjects of the day, and I need a great cup of coffee. There are a lot of coffee companies out there that are really woke. You probably think of a couple brands in your brain right now as I said that. And that's exactly why I want you to know about Blackout Coffee, because they are a hardcore conservative coffee company that gives you not an average, but a premium cup of coffee each and every day. And I want you to try it, because once you do, you're going to love it. I'm going to save you 20% off right now by going to blackoutcoffee.com/verdict. Yeah, blackoutcoffee.com/verdict, and you'll get 20% off your first order. Their coffee is 100% America, 0% woke. Blackout Coffee is committed to conservative values, from sourcing of the beans to the roasting process, customer support, and shipping. They embody true American values, and they accept no compromise on taste or quality. Now, if you're like me and you travel, you've got to check out their instant coffee, because it is premium instant coffee, and you're going to love it. If you like flavored coffee, they have an amazing assortment of different flavors, including a cinnamon coffee that is now my new favorite. Or if you're just a traditionalist and you just want a great cup of non-flavored coffee, grab Blackout Coffee right now. Go to blackoutcoffee.com/verdict and use that coupon code VERDICT for 20% off your first order. Be awake, not woke. That's blackoutcoffee.com/verdict, promo code VERDICT for 20% off. Hamas lies about their numbers.
Yes.
John Kirby at the White House this week, he gave numbers. He was asked about numbers. Numbers that have multiple times been proven to be lies from Hamas about their casualties, civilian casualties specifically, trying to turn the world against Israel. And yet he's taking these numbers as if they are truth. Take a look at him at the White House.
I have a question about the death toll in Gaza. Does President Biden have confidence in the casualty numbers coming out of Gaza?
The president watches this very, very closely. And you've heard him talk about the more than 30,000 people that have been killed, and he said the majority are women and children. He's also said that's unacceptable. And as we've maintained time and time again, the right number of civilian casualties ought to be 0. But in terms of what specific number we're quoting or citing on any given day, I mean, we're doing the best we can, working with the Israelis to ascertain the scope of the civilian suffering, but it's obviously immense.
Has his confidence in the numbers coming out of Gaza increased since late October, when he said he had no confidence in the numbers?
You've heard the president talk about the numbers and talk about the concern. And the most important thing, aside from obviously how tragic that is what we're doing to alleviate and help improve conditions in Gaza, including through this temporary period today.
This is how much they're pandering. It was the numbers were terrible. We don't trust Hamas. They're lying to us. But now, well, we need these numbers to be somewhat high so we can justify demanding a ceasefire from Israel.
Well, it's interesting as you listen to John Kirby. Have you noticed that Karine Jean-Pierre has been utterly sidelined?
Yeah.
That she's a terrible liar, and I'll give Kirby credit. He's a much better liar than she is. He's much more skilled at it. He sounds more reasonable as he's sitting there repeating Hamas's propaganda. And he says, well, you've heard Joe Biden do it many times. Yes, that's the problem. Joe Biden amplifies Hamas propaganda. And that is part of the strategy. That's something we've talked about on this podcast a lot. Hamas's strategy, they are not strong enough alone to defeat Israel. Their strategy is to put out lies and also to use human shields to have Palestinian civilian casualties that Hamas wants. In fact, when Palestinian civilians try to flee harm's way, Hamas will stop them and say, no, we need you there to die. And the reason they do it is they know the useful idiots will repeat it. Look, listen to Joe Biden back again at his commencement address.
What rights do the Palestinian people have? I'm working to make sure we finally get a two-state solution, the only solution.
The only solution, Senator. So the only solution is if the terrorists are involved, they got to have their own state, and we got to keep saying this no matter what Hamas does, no matter how horrific the next attack is, they have to have a two-state solution. And he said it out loud. He said what we've been implying here for quite some time, that this is the President of the United States of America undermining Israel every chance he gets.
And that has happened literally from day one when Joe Biden was sworn in. Understand, Joe Biden has spent his entire career in public life, over 50 years, consistently undermining Israel. This has been constant. Now, the media repeats, oh, Biden's a friend of Israel. Look, you and I talked about in this pod before how in 1982, when I was 11 years old and you were an infant, Joe Biden was threatening to cut off weapons to Israel in 1982 in the Senate. He has been doing this a long, long time. When he came into the White House, they systematically attacked Israel. They also funneled over $100 billion to Iran. They funded Iran. They funded Hamas. Now, they funded Hamas both through Iran, because 90% of Hamas's funding comes from Iran. They funded Hezbollah through Iran, because 90% of Hezbollah's funding comes from Iran. But they also sent hundreds of millions of dollars to Gaza, which they knew would go directly to Hamas and be used for terror killings. Joe Biden, which he somehow didn't tell this to the college kids in the commencement address, in a very real sense, funded the death squads that murdered Jews. And you know what? Some of those radicals, if he told them, I paid for the October 7th death squads, some of those campus radicals would cheer for that.
Yeah.
Because if you look at what they're cheering on their takeover on campuses, they are cheering the mass murder. They are promising
from the river to the sea
more October 7th every day. Now, here's some good news, which is we are going to force Senate Democrats to go on record. So this past week, the House of Representatives passed legislation to force Joe Biden to provide the weapons to Israel that it needs to defend itself. Now, remember, Joe Biden lied to the American people and lied to Congress when we were having the big fight over the supplemental a couple weeks ago. Yeah. He said, we got to do this to get weapons to Israel. As soon as Congress passes it, what did he do? Said, oh, we're not going to give weapons to Israel. Psych. I mean, he's like Charlie Brown with Lucy and the football. That's exactly what he's done. So he is blocking the weapons to Israel. And by the way, listen to John Kirby. He's still blocking them. Give John Kirby a listen.
It's not a withholding. Just there was a pause put in place on a shipment of 2,000-pound bombs, and that pause is still in place.
So it's still in place. Yeah. And by the way, do you know what they're freezing? The precision-guided munitions, what actually lets them hit the terrorists and not civilians. So understand, because the Biden White House is so unhappy about civilian deaths, they want to take away the precision-guided munitions that allow Israel to avoid hitting civilians and only hit terrorists. These are a bunch of Israel-hating left-wing radicals that are setting government policy. The House passed legislation this past week that would force the Biden administration to provide the weapons that Congress has already appropriated and directed to be given. Now, in the House, virtually every single House Democrat voted no. It was very close to a party line vote. It's come over to the Senate. What do you think is going to happen in the Senate?
I'm assuming Schumer's going to say we don't like any of this.
Schumer has already said he will not allow a vote. So understand, Chuck Schumer, if Joe Biden is the greatest friend Hamas and Hezbollah has ever had, Chuck Schumer is the second greatest friend Hamas and Hezbollah has ever had. And by the way,
and historically, Schumer's always said, oh, I'm an Israel guy.
He's defined himself as the defender of Israel.
Yeah.
And he is right now defending Hamas and supporting Joe Biden in cutting off weapons to Israel. Like Chuck Schumer, the language and words he said for 30 years are all being turned on their head because Schumer, just like Biden, just like the rest of the Democrats, is terrified of the radical left that is their base. Now, Schumer, as majority leader, controls whether we have votes. He said, I will not allow a vote on what the House has passed to force the weapons to be delivered to Israel. Here's the good news. Last week, I filed 2 different pieces of legislation. One, legislation in the Senate to force the Biden administration to provide those weapons to Israel. It's called the ARM Act. Now, Schumer's not going to allow a vote on that either. He doesn't want to vote on that. But secondly, I filed what is called a war powers resolution, focusing on the Biden administration that has built this floating pier in Gaza, several $100 million. It sent the military in to build the floating pier. The purpose of the pier is to be able to fund, quote, aid to Gaza, to Hamas. They basically have built this so that they can get supplies to Hamas, because Joe Biden is very focused on resupplying Hamas while he's boycotting Israel. Now, why does it matter that it's a war powers resolution? Because the legislation, the War Powers Act, has a provision that makes a war powers resolution privileged. Now, that sounds like a lot of Senate gobbledygook.
But it's important. What
it means is I can force a vote and Schumer can't stop it. That the majority leader has no ability to stop a vote once you file a war powers resolution, because what it's focusing on is cutting off U.S. military action without congressional authorization. And in this case, the military is who Biden used to build the pier. And by the way, Biden is saying to Israel right now, hey, the Israeli military has got to protect this pier that we built. You've got to risk Israeli soldiers to protect the pier that is there to resupply Hamas. And we're going to have U.S. soldiers also in harm's way. So the War Powers Resolution, within 2 weeks, we will have a vote on the Senate floor, and Schumer has no means of stopping it. By the way, it's also a vote at a threshold of 50 and not 60, which means if 2 Democrats actually decided they supported Israel, we could prevail and pass my resolution on the floor of the Senate.
So a guy like John Fetterman, for example, who's been very outspoken on Israel, is somebody that you could say, hey, you never know.
Look, I'm going to try. I don't know how he'll vote, but this is a vote. The Biden administration's policy is they've decided they support Hamas and not Israel. That is exactly backwards what any rational policy would be. This vote I'm going to force is going to let every Senate Democrat decide which side are you on. Do you want to support Hamas or do you want to support Israel? Now, my prediction is we'll lose on a party line vote or close to party line vote. That I think the Democrats are quite happy today being the party that supports Hamas, that they agree with what Joe Biden told those college kids.
And that's because their data says if you want to get reelected, you need younger voters, and they're afraid they're going to stay home if they don't go anti-Israel.
Yeah, look, part of it is political. Part of it is, as we've talked about a lot of times, Trump broke the Democrat Party. Their minds have melted. And as a result, they are now on the hard left. And the cultural Marxist worldview divides the world into oppressors and victims. And today's Democrats believe Jews are oppressors. And importantly, Ben, I did not say Israelis.
Yeah, great point.
If you look at what the radicals on campus are chanting, they're chanting about Jews. At the University of Washington, the radicals yelled, "Go back to the ovens." I mean, that's evil. It is grotesque, but that is what they are calling for. You'll recall, we talked about this on an early podcast, the protest at Columbia, where you had this Columbia student, this blonde white girl who apparently is the daughter of multimillionaires, who was wearing a mask and holding up a sign with an arrow pointed at Jewish students behind her, waving an Israeli flag and an American flag, and she said, Al-Qassam's next target. Al-Qassam is the military arm of Hamas. She was calling for the murder of fellow students because they are Jewish. Let me point out, as far as we know, the Columbia students waving the Israeli flag were not themselves Israeli. But it didn't matter to her.
Yeah,
if they were Jews, they should be murdered. And she was, by all appearances, not Middle Eastern. She wasn't Palestinian. She's just a blonde white liberal who's been told Jews are oppressors, so they should be killed. It is a sickness that sadly many of the administrators and many of the faculty not only agreed with, they are the ones who created the sickness, who inculcated the students, who taught the students this garbage.
There are a lot of you that listen to this show that have been asking the question, how can I get involved and help the people in need in Israel? Well, right now there are major needs in Israel. And IFCJ, the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, is on the ground right now helping those in need. You may not realize, but there are still many parts of Israel that are under attack, and there are many people that have had to move out of their homes altogether. There's also another major need, and that is for bomb shelters. And IFCJ right now is installing these temporary bomb shelters all over Israel. Because when that moment happens and you need to get to a shelter, you have about 15 to 20 seconds to get there. So if you want to get involved and help the people in Israel, go to supportifcj.org to give. That's one word, supportifcj.org. What's amazing is what they're doing. They're providing life-saving emergency supplies for 20 people that can huddle in a bomb shelter. And the cost to put that together and distribute these life-saving kits is about $290 each. And your gift will help save lives. Thanks to a matching challenge gift from a generous IFCJ supporter, your gift right now will be doubled in impact to help provide twice the support. So if you want to call, you can do that as well. 888-488-IFCJ. That's 888-488-IFCJ. Or go online to supportifcj.org to give right now. That's one word, supportifcj.org. Final question on this. You know, Bibi, you understand Israel right now. How concerned are they about not getting these munitions and being paused? And how long could this pause last?
Look, I think Israel will fight and will continue to fight to defeat Hamas regardless of what Biden does. Israel is a strong nation with a strong industrial base, and they'll continue fighting. This is about domestic politics for the Democrats. This is about Michigan. This is about Nevada. This is about Dearborn, Michigan. This is about young people. There's a reason Biden went to a college campus to give this speech, because he's trying to speak to the radicals, the people that are waving Hezbollah flags sadly at my alma mater, Princeton. That's whose votes Biden wants. That's whose votes the Democrats want, and nobody speaks with any clarity. He didn't stand up and say, let me tell you right now, if you threaten the safety of another student, if you threaten to harm someone because he or she is Jewish, you will be arrested, you will be prosecuted, you should be expelled, and if you're a foreign student, you will be deported. That's actually what a real president would do. He didn't do what Dwight D. Eisenhower did when bigoted Democrats, and by the way, it was Democrats then too, would not let African Americans be integrated into school. Dwight D. Eisenhower sent in the National Guard. Joe Biden hadn't sent in the National Guard. Joe Biden hadn't sent in the Civil Rights Department to protect the rights of Jewish students. He hasn't sent in the FBI to investigate the foreign funding. We've talked about in recent podcasts the Chinese communist funding behind this, the Cuban communist funding behind this. Also, how much is this tied up with international terrorist networks? He's not investigating any of this. Instead, when given a choice, Joe Biden and the Democrats choose Hamas over Israel. It's tragic.
Don't ask, don't tell. I want to move on to something else that also is really important. There's been a lot of conversation around IVF, protecting IVF. My 3 kids are from in vitro. Without it, I don't think we would have the family we have now. It allowed us to have a family. And it is such an important issue. You understand that and are moving forward with some really, I say, cool legislation, bipartisan, to protect IVF, and that's going to be coming up. Tell us about that and how this came about.
Well, look, the broader context, this really started to become a political issue when the Alabama Supreme Court issued a decision a couple of months ago. And that case concerned a couple who had used IVF and had frozen embryos, and the clinic negligently allowed those embryos to be destroyed. So they were supposed to preserve those embryos, and the clinic screwed up. And so the couple was in a lawsuit, and the Alabama Supreme Court concluded that the embryos should be protected. And what happened was, look, that was a decision protecting the rights of parents to have IVF. But the media proceeded to go nuts and to say, oh, well, this is the Alabama Supreme Court saying you can't do IVF. And then the Democrats leapt on it, and it became a major national issue that this is all about Republicans want to ban IVF, which is a flat out and total lie. And my view, I strongly and unequivocally support IVF. I think IVF is an incredible technology. You know, Ben, it's amazing. 2% of all live births in America are through IVF.
Yeah.
Millions of babies have been brought into the world, have seen life. Millions of parents have become moms and dads because of IVF. It is an amazing technology, and I strongly support it. And the Democrats made a very cynical political decision, which is, listen, for Democrats, abortion is front and center. After hating Israel, it may be their most important issue. But Democrats also realize their position on abortion is wildly unpopular. Democrats support unlimited abortion with zero restrictions, partial birth abortion, right up until the moment of delivery. That is so radical and extreme, only 9% of Americans agree with that. 91% of Americans say that's too much. So Democrats can't defend their actual position. By the way, that is the position of every single Democrat in the Senate, because they voted in favor of legislation striking down every single restriction on abortion right up until the moment of birth. So what they do instead is they want to talk about IVF, and they want to say, ooh, the big bad Republicans want to take away IVF. And so they engage deliberately in deception. And then the corporate media is eagerly complicit in doing so, because they share the same radical views on abortion, that they don't want to talk about the radical views, so they want to talk instead about IVF. Well, today I've introduced legislation in the Senate called the IVF Protection Act. I teamed up with Katie Britt, senator from Alabama. She's a good friend. The two of us have drafted it. It's very simple legislation. It's straightforward, and it says that no state or local government can ban IVF, that IVF is fully protected at the federal level, that it will be a decision of parents. If you want to have children using IVF, that will be a federally protected right. This bill should be easily a bipartisan bill. This bill, if enacted and written into law, would put into law the protections that protect. Look, your kids came through IVF. What did that mean to you? What did that mean for your family?
I mean, got to be a father, and my wife got to be a mother, and we tried for 4 years to have kids. And you keep going to doctors, and you keep going to these visits, and then finally they're like, look, we think probably your only option is going to be IVF. Let's hope this works. And we went through it, and we prayed, and you save money because it wasn't covered by insurance. It's very expensive. And it was one of those, it was probably the hardest time, I think, in our life, in our marriage, because my wife wanted to be a mom.
Yeah.
That's and when you go
that's
for
a huge
4 years,
part of both of your lives, and
yeah,
everything, your legacy, as much as you do in life, nothing will be important than the children you raise and the legacy that goes forward.
Yeah, and you've got to protect it. I'm thankful that you're doing this. I'm thankful that you're teaming up. I hope that Democrats will say this is a non-political issue, and we should push for this because everybody needs to be able to have this, and that right and be protected. Have you heard from Democrats? Are they going to get on board? Because this doesn't seem political to me. I know so many people that have voted for Joe Biden that have done IVF,
of course,
voted for Bernie Sanders that did IVF. I mean, it's not political. It's wanting to have a family.
So we filed the legislation today. Today, Katie Britt and I have an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, so you should go and read the op-ed we wrote in the Wall Street Journal. It's in today's journal. Today, I'm in New York on Monday. I'm going to be in New York City with Katie. We're going to do a number of media interviews starting early in the morning, talking about this legislation. I think it is really important legislation. This should be legislation that passes the Senate 100-0. Every senator agrees with the substantive policy. Katie and I are going to try to pass it, and we're going to go to the Senate floor and seek to pass it. And what I do not know is if the Democrats will block it. And if they block it, it would be, even for today's Democrat Party, an incredibly cynical move, because what it would be is the Democrats saying, you know what? We want to have the issue. We want to accuse Republicans of trying to ban IVF, and so we're going to prevent you from protecting IVF.
So we can say you want to ban it.
So then we can falsely claim you want to ban it. That would be the only conceivable reason the Democrats could object, is if they do not want to protect IVF. Now, the Democrats have their own bill that they claim is about IVF, but it actually is an abortion bill focused on their broader abortion agenda, and they know that. This is a very narrow bill that puts in clear, ironclad protections for IVF. As I said, every senator, Republican and Democrat, agrees with that policy. So the only question is, will the Democrats play politics so much that they will oppose a policy that they agree with because they don't want to give up on the issue? I don't know. I hope not, but we'll see. We'll see what the Democrat reaction to it is.
Is this one of those moments where Verdict listeners, people that share this show on social media, should definitely reach out to their senators and say, hey, this is a nonpartisan, non-political issue. We're asking you to support it, and call with that spirit in mind to their senator, no matter where they live?
Absolutely, yes. Look, this is something IVF has support. Nearly 90% of Americans support IVF. IVF is profoundly pro-family. It is a miracle. Look, for most of human history, if parents are not able to conceive, they're just left childless and in sorrow. And it is through the miracles of science that parents who struggle with infertility are able to be moms and dads and raise babies and children. That is a wonderful, beautiful thing. And I hope we see some bipartisan unity. The next week or two, we'll find out.
Senator, I hope you have great success on this bill. We're going to keep everybody updated on it as it moves forward. Finally, I do have to call out the media. This week was one heck of a week in New York City, where you're headed. And it made me laugh because the media now seems to be hedging their bets that Donald Trump may win in a New York court because of the disaster that's been this trial with Bragg at the end and with Cohen, to the point where even CNN said this. Take a look.
If I'm a juror, I've been warned that Michael Cohen lies. The prosecutors have said this. They've set it up. I'm prepared for that. I'm prepared for he's lied in the past repeatedly. I don't know if a jury is prepared for he lied to this jury 2 days ago, but now he's really telling the truth.
If you have a cooperating witness that can't tell the truth at a plea allocution, that means that that witness is basically worthless.
He testified he lied to the judge.
Right.
In this prior case.
And then Todd Blanche's cross-examination. So basically, whenever you get into a problem, it's always blame somebody else. Blame President Trump, blame the judge. How many places do you have to go where this guy has lied many times under oath, and it's always somebody else's fault? It's not his fault. And that's pretty powerful evidence to a jury to say you shouldn't believe anything this guy says. And if you have to rely on his testimony in any fashion whatsoever in order to convict Donald Trump, i.e., in order to fix Donald Trump's intent, you have a reasonable doubt. You can't have anything else but a reasonable doubt.
7 people were on that panel. 7. And this is how they've been covering the Trump trial the entire time. It's the center of the world for Democrats. They want him to be guilty. They've gone all in with their most brilliant minds. And now at the very end, they're like, yeah, it's probably not going to happen because this guy's a liar and the whole case is a joke.
Look, they are obsessed with the Trump trial. CNN covers it from dawn to dusk, constantly, breathlessly. They get so excited when Stormy Daniels is on the stand and talking about sex with the president. Oh, that makes their cold little hearts go pitter-pat at CNN. But it says something when even CNN is like, wow, this case is weak.
And it only takes one.
They are getting very, very nervous. And here, play the second clip.
Anderson, let me ask you, if I could put you in the jury box, having just witnessed that piece of cross-examination, do you have doubts that conversation happened the way Michael Cohen testified on his direct examination, that he called Trump insular?
I think it's absolutely. Huh. I think it's devastating, for Michael Cohen's credibility on this, in this one particular topic, whether it's, he just didn't, it's hard to... I don't know. Yes, I think if I was a juror in this case, watching that, I would think this guy's making this up as he's going along, or he's making this particular story up. Todd Blanche was pointing out, you were testifying just on Tuesday in this court, and all morning long he's been pointing out, inconsistencies in Michael Cohen's testimony, or at least questionable aspects of Michael Cohen's testimony, but nothing that you would necessarily as a juror think, okay, that's clearly a lie. Maybe that's just he was misunderstanding, or he was bragging, or whatever. This one, Todd Blanche clearly saved this to right before the lunch break, I'm assuming, because it was just so well crafted and just point by point walking through this story, which at first seemed, why this seems like a ridiculous story. Some 14-year-old is sending him, nasty text messages, and he's going to call Keith Schiller about it. And then you realize, you look at he showed the phone logs that the prosecutor had shown, and it's the phone call that Michael Cohen had previously talked about. I think it is severely damaging to Michael Cohen's testimony.
I mean, this has got to be like their worst day ever at CNN went to watch this. And they're sitting there going, all right, look, Mike Cohen's a liar. The whole case is a sham.
Look, I'm actually wondering if CNN, like if the hosts have become day drinkers now, like if they're slamming back tequila shots. The sadness that they're saying it. Now, listen, to be clear, Trump could still be convicted.
Sure.
This is a wildly left-wing prosecutor. This is a wildly left-wing judge. And this is a jury drawn from a New York jury pool, so presumably it is an overwhelmingly Democrat jury. I don't believe any conviction, if there is one, will stand up on appeal. But look, given how bad things went, we could see an acquittal.
So if you're like me and you love to go shooting, you're a hunter, maybe you just like to practice shooting, you know what happened over the last couple of years with a massive shortage when it came to ammunition. Well, how would you like to know that when the next run on ammo happens, you don't have to worry about being out of ammo or paying double, triple, or quadruple what it costs right now? You can do it by going to ammosquared.com, and this company you're going to love. Ammo Squared helps you stock up on ammunition automatically. Yes, it's automated. Set it and forget it ammo purchasing program. You get to pick your caliber, set your budget, select a shipping trigger, and that's it. Your ammo grows slowly over time and is stored for free as it builds up, and it's shipped whenever you want it sent to you. It's like an ammunition subscription on steroids because you aren't forced into a set budget and or for it to ship every month. Instead, you decide your budget and schedule when you want your ammo shipped to you. Ammo Squared offers over 60 different caliber options, and each shipment contains a carefully curated mix of factory new ammo from brands you know and love. The best part is it's budget-friendly and customizable. Buy as little as a few dollars a month and use those dollar cost average over time and take advantage when the prices get low. Everything is managed online using a simple web app. So forget about moving heavy cases of ammo in your garage or trying to sell it online. You can literally exchange your Ammo Squared inventory from one caliber to another in seconds with just a few clicks and sell it all back if you need the money or if prices go through the roof. There is no minimum to buy, no memberships needed, and no extra fees. Customers can buy ammo on a small budget, then watch it grow over time like a savings account. Sign up at ammosquared.com/Ben. That's ammosquared.com/Ben today to get free ammo in your account. ammosquared.com/Ben today. Last question on this. Will Trump be on the stand before the end of this trial?
Absolutely not. 0.000% chance.
Why?
Number one, the criminal defendant has no burden of proof. It is the prosecution that has the burden of proof. The prosecution has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant committed the crime. Number two, any defendant has a Fifth Amendment right protected in the Constitution not to testify at his own trial, and most defendants choose not to. But number three, for any lawyer to put Donald J. Trump on the stand under oath and to open him up to cross-examination, and by the way, cross-examination about damn near anything, particularly with a left-wing judge who's a partisan, who is not going to corral in the cross-examination, you are inviting disaster. To be clear, there is no chance Donald Trump would be put on the stand. It would be lunacy to do so. I don't know if the Trump team will have other witnesses they put on or not. They might not. But it is an absolute certainty Trump will not be one of them. And hopefully this circus will be over soon.
It only takes one brave juror to do the right thing here, that's for sure. Don't forget, we do this show Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays. Make sure you hit that subscribe, follow, or auto-download button on those in-between days. Grab my podcast. I'll keep you up to date on the latest breaking news, Ben Ferguson podcast. It's free wherever you get your podcasts as well. And the Senator and I will see you back here on Wednesday morning.